And we would want to take this opportunity to speak to the leaders of this country, particularly those who are in the government and those who are in the Teacher Service Commission, that it is so important that you speed up and accelerate talking with the teachers about this impending strike, so that we do not have our children again staying at home. They have already wasted a lot of time at home. It is important that these children be able to open the school. Please resolve this conflict that it seems to exist by having dialogue, by agreeing, so that the education is not interrupted. You also need to remove the anxiety of the parents when they keep wondering whether to take their children to school or not. It is important that that anxiety is resolved. Please, whatever the agreements are, whatever the issues are, we are also appealing to the teachers and the leaders, the CUPET and the rest of the leadership, that there comes a time when the importance or the needs of the welfare of the children becomes more important than the welfare of the workers. So sometimes to allow more time for dialogue without interrupting the education of the children and the anxieties that we normally see. So that is so important.
Now, Chief Justice Martha Koome has questioned the criteria used to categorize learners under the new university funding model, which has seen many vulnerable students placed in bands that do not consider the realities of their needy backgrounds. Koome is proposing the consolidation of the NGCDF bursaries and those issued to governors, women representatives and MCAs to make education accessible for all. Now, Kenya Party leader Martha Karua termed the funding model oppressive and a breach of the right to access to education net for all Kenyan students. Safina Ching Omar reports.
New university funding model being implemented by the government has attracted a strong wave of criticism, the latest being concerns raised by Chief Justice Martha Koome, who is now questioning the criteria used to categorize learners and how the realities of those from needy backgrounds was missed.
As a child who has qualified to go to the university can be there crying, saying, look, I've been put in band 5. Is it band 5? When I ought to be in band 1, and therefore I cannot afford to go to the university. And when you follow, you find the person, the child of a well-to-do family, has been put in band 1.
Speaking during a meeting by the National Council of Churches of Kenya, Koome called for the streamlining of bursary funds to make education accessible for all.
When you follow, you also find that there is bursary fund given from the taxpayers' money. Bursaries, how are they disbursed? Why wouldn't you put them in education and make education free for all?
In Nairobi County, NARC Kenya Party leader Martha Karua termed the funding model oppressive.
This model, if implemented without meaningful public participation, is not only unconstitutional but also discriminatory. It exacerbates the socio-economic inequalities that already plague our nation, denying countless young Kenyans the opportunity to better their lives through education.
This even as Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Migos Ogamba directed Vice Chancellors to admit all students regardless of whether they have paid the household contribution or not.
We've opened a portal where when they have a challenge, they could go in there and say, I am in the wrong band, can you band me in the right place, depending on the evidence that they submit. And because of that, we realized that it might delay the admission of the students to universities. So we requested the universities to admit them as we solve that problem, because it has to be solved.
Migos stated that the recategorization exercise based on appeals sent will be concluded within the next 2 to 3 weeks, after which funds will be released to universities.
It's an important subject because all of you know that education is the equalizer that makes the children of every citizen from all communities, from all walks of life, coming from all backgrounds, to be equal. All of you remember, during the last election, there was a very big debate on 2 subjects. one, about CBC and where it was going. I remember in many instances, citizens were wondering what is going to happen to our children after grade 6. What's going to happen next? What's the future of CBC? The other very important subject was the status of our universities. At that time, 23 out of our 40 public universities were technically bankrupt or insolvent.
Your Excellency, my name is Mogesi Maroa. I'm a concerned citizen, a youth leader from Kuria, Migori County, and the president of Mount Kenya University Parklands Law Campus. Your Excellency, you've said time and again that this new funding model is student-based. Well, my question is, why is it that students from private universities are only given loans as opposed to scholarships, just like it is in public universities, yet these students are all from taxpayers of this country? Thank you.
Mugesi Maroa, sorry if I get your name right. You have a very valid point that private universities have students whose parents are taxpayers. That's correct. Public universities are run using public funds. We sponsor, as Government of Kenya, public universities. Private universities have sponsors. They have foundations. They are run by people who have networks of raising funds, either using foundations or other means, which sometimes as government we don't have. And because we value the fact that even those in private universities are also Kenyan students and their parents are taxpayers, that is why we haven't shut the door on them. We have said we are going to make public resources available to those students as loans, the same way we are making public resources as loans available to students in public universities. The only reason, Mogesi, why we, in this model, we have said we cannot provide for scholarship is because in the past, we said we are going to give them scholarship. And because we didn't have the money, we didn't. And we put many of those private universities in a lot of trouble. In fact, one public university closed down because we took students to them. They trained the students. We owe them money. They couldn't pay their staff. They couldn't pay. They closed down. So it is better we keep our word. It is better for us to say, this is the much we can do, rather than for us to say we can do so much. Today we have a debt of about 51 billion shillings owed to our private universities. It is a debt that we must pay, but it is unfair for us to continue to accumulate debt. It is better we tell them, for the moment, we cannot afford, but in the future, when our situation improves, we can reconsider.
We also want to talk to especially the government and the people who are responsible for the university education. The system that has been used to provide funding seems to be very discriminatory, appears to be discriminatory. It appears to not to be very straightforward. How can we have people from very needy families not qualifying and being categorized, whether it's category 1 or category 2? Those categories need to be re-examined so that we do not deny brilliant and bright students from the needy families from the access to education. It need to be looked into, and properly checked so that we don't discriminate or actually lose good students and end up funding people who come from families where they can be funded. Like us, GOA, we deal with children from orphanages. We have over 70 secondary orphans that we fund. Why wouldn't they qualify for the category that requires more money in the funding? And instead, if we end up finding people from able homes.
Higher Education Loans Board, can you help me explain how do we treat that parent? Mr. Gishangi wants to know what category is that student? Can you help me?
Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity. I'm not working for HELP, but I am a member of MTI Task Force and a lecturer at Laikipia University. My name is Dr. Alex Kibet, and I'm going to explain my understanding of this MTI. From the question that was asked was, how do we treat someone who has a lot of dependents? And from the questions that an applicant is asked is, how many dependents do you have? And the main reason why you're required to give that particular response is so that the MTI can be able to calculate a per capita of that particular household before, which is going to be used as an input for determining your score, and which is going to be used as an input for your final score that determine where you will be banded. And maybe to just say something, Mr. President, as an addition to what you have said. They have indicated, or you have indicated, that there are 10 indicators that show, or that are used, or that work as a variable. There are actually 10 super variables that are used to determine your level of need. But in reality, with each super, there are several other sub-indicators. For example, a family structure, for instance, which is, it has a variable on, you have both parents, you have a single parent, which is a mother, a single parent, which is a father, all the way to someone who is an abandoned child in the street. And all of them are taken care of. So that when all these factors, from the general super variable to sub-variables, the MTI makes sure that you are classified correctly. The only challenge, my president, that we experienced, because I was at least part of the team that analyzed the information, is the quality of information that our applicants provide for that particular system. This is a system that whatever comes out of it depends on what we input. So if we don't provide the correct information, then we're going to be banded wrongly. And because we are coming from a point that this is a new system, one of the recommendations that we gave to HELP and higher education was, please leave a room so that if there is anyone who may have submitted wrong information, can still re-provide an information that can be used for reconsideration. And that is why there is an open appeal for a fund, that if you have a different information from what you presented, you can re-provide and you can be reconsidered. And from the first information you've been given is within the next 3 weeks, that is going to be reconsidered. There's something else, again, Mr. President, that I would also wish to state. Is there's something on what if a situation changes in your course of your studies? How are you going to be taken care of? Let's say today you have both parents, and at the second year of your studies, something happens. Again, that is a factor that during our task force we considered and said, if a circumstance change, like your parents, guardian loses job, your parent loses job, you lose parents, you can re-provide the information that please reconsider my banding or my categorization so that I can have a space or be treated where I am supposed to be. There are some other small recommendations that we have suggested to them, and we hope they are going to work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, His Excellency. My name is Bonaya Rova from Kenyatta University, a 6th-year architect student, anticipating graduation in December At the preamble of your speech, you began by denoting that education is an equalizer. Therefore, I have two questions. One, if indeed education is an equalizer, how will this new funding model assist those persons living with disability? Because you do believe disability is not inability. My second question goes to, I'm from Tana River County, so we are believed to be those that come from marginalized areas of this country. So, you've spoken about cybers. In my local area, the next cyber you normally travel close to about 46 kilometers. I believe you've been there. Ama namna gani? So, mine is to ask on these persons that live in marginalized areas, if they will be able to access internet and all this connectivity for them to be able to be put along this new funding model. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe I should answer those questions first. Maybe starting with Bonaya. Bonaya, first, congratulations. 60 years is quite something, you know, and I wish you well. Students who live with disability, as I have said, in this model, we have actually said that those students living with disability, they automatically qualify for Band 1. They get 95% funding, both scholarship and loan. 80% loan, 15% scholarship. Help me, where is the PS? It is Band 1, again, so that I don't...
Your Excellency, 95% government support,
Yes.
70% scholarships and 25% loan.
Okay, 70% scholarship and 25% loan, yes. Correct. So those are the students, and the parents only pay 5%. In the old model, they were paying 20%. Was what was outlined. Secondly, you are aware that people living with severe disability, we have expanded the numbers of citizens who now qualify for cash transfer. We had 1.2 million citizens. We've now expanded that to 1.7 million citizens. We just recruited another 500,000 aged orphans and people living with disability, for us to be able to look after the vulnerable. Because as a society, we have to look out for the people who are vulnerable, especially those who live with disability. Number two, you asked me about cyber. It is true. I was in Tana River actually about a month and a half ago. And I can confirm that the distances are far. But the good news is this. If you speak to your member of parliament, we have already agreed with them that they will set up an ICT hub in every ward in Kenya. We have changed the law. The CDF law that was used for just building schools, we changed the law. I signed the law into effect, and now we are using CDF to build an ICT hub in every ward for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is to make sure that ICT infrastructure is available to citizens, including students. Number 2 is because we have a big program on digital jobs. And number 3, we want to encourage digital commerce, and we want government services to be available on that digital space, and therefore citizens don't have to come to Nairobi or to go to other areas. They can access government services from those ICT hubs. So we have a plan, around the ICT hubs. I got a brief yesterday. We are now delivering we are now delivering internet using Kenya power lines. It's easier. So every place where we will have a Kenya power line, it will be possible to access the internet. We have already rolled out that program.
Your Excellency, I'm Newton Kipleting Lagat, the President Cooperative University of Kenya. I've got one serious problem that it's really affecting the public universities' diploma students. They've been denied scholarship. They've been denied HEF, that is higher education funds. And to add on that, they do not qualify for help. That means they are going to educate themselves when taking their diplomas. It does not end there. When they graduate from diploma, they transit to degree. For you to qualify for scholarship or HEF, you must have transited from high school or secondary school to a campus through COOPs. Diploma students are not in COOPs. They've already gone. So that means you've educated yourself in your diploma. You're again going to educate yourself when taking your degree. The new funding model has not addressed that. Thank you.
My good friend, Mr. Lagat, you've made a case for diploma students that they don't qualify. And I think your question is diploma students who are studying in universities. The loans and provisions we have made are for students in our TVETs. And I will tell you where the difference is. You know, as a way of making sure that our TVETs function, when I was Minister for Higher Education, I found out that it was cheaper to go to university than to go to a TVET institution. That was the case. Because we didn't consider properly TVETs. And it is one challenge I had to deal with. Because for a very long time, as a country, we considered TVET as a place for students who are failures, for lack of a better word. And that was a very wrong classification. And that is why when I became Minister for Higher Education, I brought a very big conversation. In fact, it was a very controversial conversation. I remember one Vice Chancellor of Moi University then, Professor Ogot, saying that the minister is causing confusion because this TVET thing is not the thing to do. But the reality is, whether you go to Germany, whether you go to Australia, many of their students go to TVET institutions. There is a lot of value in us balancing our education between knowledge on one end and competence and skills on another end. And therefore, it is the reason why I pushed very hard. When I was minister in 2009, 2010, there were only maybe 20,000 students in our TVETs. I started the first 30 TVET institutions. Today, I am very happy that we have 720,000 students in TVET from 20,000. And we have made huge progress. And we have closed many skills gap that existed. So I quite agree with you that we must not discriminate. It is the reason why in this funding model, we have enhanced scholarship and loans for our Tibet students, and also we have maintained their upkeep, just the same way we are doing for our universities. As for your case, when universities are being considered, they are being considered to provide university degrees. We were trying to discourage universities from also doubling up and doing diploma courses, because there are many institutions now. We have close to 250 Tibet institutions that can offer diploma courses. But the saving grace is that if you are a diploma student and you join a university after your diploma, you join as a second year, I think, you qualify for Higher Education Loans Board from there. And those are the instructions that we have given to the Higher Education Loans Board. Can we have a confirmation from you, gentlemen, that that is the case? I want you to answer that, gentleman.
That is the case, Your Excellency. They are funded like any other student when they join university for degrees.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And standing on the already established protocol, Your Excellency, my name is Evans Moshanga. I come from Chuka University. I'm a law student headed to fourth year. And Your Excellency, thank you for laying the background. And Your Excellency, we have seen the principles that you're coming from. But Your Excellency, in the 5,300 students that Chuka University has called so far, there is a concern of loans and interest. Your Excellency, loans and interest are at the core of this particular model and are at the core of the concern of these particular students. Your Excellency, I was just looking at the statistics, just to be factual in nature, and I was seeing that by 2023, we had around 120,000 defaulters. That's an estimate of 8.5 billion shillings due to these loans and interest. When I was looking at the statistics, in the United States of America, we had a debt crisis of around 1.6 trillion US dollars and 48 million defaulters. So, Your Excellency, the point of concern is, can these loans be made as grants? That's number one, Your Excellency. And why isn't that the case? Because you've already said that you can't make them grants and you can't make them scholarships. So number two, Your Excellency, can we increase the grace period for the repayment of these particular loans? Or number three, Your Excellency, can we reduce the interest at which we pay these particular loans? Your Excellency, that's part of what we discussed in our small baraza.
Evans, my good friend Evans Mushanga. Your issue is that the loans and the default. You know, the loan issue is not, as I told you earlier, is not a new phenomenon. All of us, I can tell you, any student who has gone through university, unless their parents paid the full fee, they have a loan. And I don't think there is any crime in having a loan. And I don't think there is any crime if you have a loan and you genuinely don't have the money to pay for it. I am agreeable that we must look into the subject of a grace period, especially to consider that no student should be asked to pay until they have a job. I am agreeable to that. Because you can't ask a person who is tamaking to pay. Because, I mean, you'd just be asking the impossible. I didn't pay myself until I got a job. nobody followed me. Maybe these people are a lot more aggressive nowadays. So I think the position should be, until we are sure of an income, and we have many ways of finding out an income, whether they are doing a good business. We can collect a lot of information from KRA and all the other agencies, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And I will encourage those of us who took a loan from the university, if you can afford to pay, please, let us pay. It's the honorable thing to do so that the next bunch of kids can also access university education. On the interest is calculated by actuarial scientists. It is not meant for government to make money. It is just meant for it to be sustainable. That by the time you're paying, if you had been given 5 shillings, it is still 5 shillings that you pay. I don't know whether that is the correct position. Again, Higher Education Loans Board, you are the people who calculate the interest. Can we lower the interest, or you want us to take it up?
Your Excellency, we did a study in 2015 called the NFAC study. And that study showed that for any 100 bob we are lending out, we are recovering 48 shillings only. Now, if that continues, in about 30 years, that fund will not be there. So, although we are charging 4%, and you know the inflation is about 8%, so we are losing the money on a daily basis. So the consideration to increase may be considered maybe after this cohort of new funding model complete their course in the next 5 years, maybe.
I don't think that's very good news. So I think we keep the interest the way it is. He wanted a lower interest. He didn't want a higher interest. You are talking about. So I think the interest at the moment is not sustainable, but let's keep it there as we figure out what to do next.
Uyu niguo bururi wao na no twende kuhoya thirikari tuteithiei nigetha ciana ici ciena meciria manene na ciena uge muingi nigetha mahote kuhuthira ugi ucio guthondeka bururi na gututongoria tondu ni atongoria aria turorete mathondeke bururi uyu. No twende kuhoya gutikagie na corruption ni kindu kimwe githukitie bururi uyu. Ta riu guku Kinangofu ona warora mabarabara-ini maria tukire nigetha tukinye guku, no twende kuhoya kuri barabara ci guku ciana nginya ciana tuika ni iguthondekwo na mbeca ciacio igatuika ni irekereirio. No twende kuhoya thirikari barabara icio reke ithondekwo, tuthondeke bururi uyu tondu ni witu nigetha tuikare wega na tuhote gutwarithia bururi uyu na mbere, tuthondeke future tondu kuu nikuo twerekeire. Ni wega muno hindi ria mundu atuika mutongoria akaroraga change iria arehe thiini wa utongoria wake iria ingithondeka bururi uyu na utue bururi mwega makiria gukira uria wa mikorire. Rekei tutige corruption, tutuike andu mena uigiririki thiini wa utongoria witu. Nituronire mutongoria wa bururi atuhe CS eru na no twende kumahoya onao thiini wa maundu macio marathurirwo nigetha matongorie. Rekei tutige ku maintain o status quo uria turakorire kuhana, tugarure maundu macio.
I have made it very clear, and I have asked sometimes we investigate an incident or a corruption case, and people rush to court, and we are given an order, you cannot investigate so-and-so. We have situations where we have been told you cannot charge so-and-so. They've gone to court and obtained an order. We must interrogate corruption so that we make sure that we deal with it from all angles.
Thank you, His Excellency. My name is Marceline Mugesi from Murang'a University. And mine is a suggestion and not a question. We have funds allocated to the constituencies to provide bursaries in the constituency level. Why can't these funds be given to help to increase the scholarship part and reduce the loans given to the students? Thank you.
I agree with you that it's a positive proposition. It is something that we need to have a conversation about. It is something that I will engage governors about, because in our constitution, it is the counties. Once money has been given to the counties, I have no authority as president to decide for the counties. But I think a national conversation that consolidates all these bursaries, and then we see how far it can go towards making our education affordable, is a very positive conversation. I am ready to engage in that conversation and provide leadership in that conversation.
I am Gishangi Gitonga, the JCOT Secretary General. Mr. President, my first question, and one of the biggest questions my people have been asking me, is why the rush? Why the rush in implementing a model that has a lot of technicalities? Why the rush? Because I am a financial engineer, and as you have said, the issue of the interest rates is determined by actuarial scientists. But the model in itself has a lot of issues up to this moment. So even if we had all these issues coupled together, you've given a lot of sad stories of people not making it to campus, of campuses such as the Scott Bible Institute being closed. But Mr. President, we have a lot of people being affected right now. While we were at Naivasha, Mr. President, once we left, we felt like rubber stamps. Naongea ukweli, comrades. For the simple reason that after that, a report was given in Naivasha. We had a summit in Naivasha around June. And the report that came out is that we had agreed to the model. And our comrades were really angry with us, Mr. President. So we felt at that point like we were being set up. Like what we are telling the people is just for formalities. And we have spoken in a lot of forums, Mr. President, but I believe you have already noticed that people are not clapping much to even the best of points, because there's a general there's a general exhaustion among the people, because we are usually given a lot of promises. We will come to forums such as this, but we know that very little of it will be implemented. And Mr. President, we also know that corruption is the biggest public expenditure. And before you came into office, there were people you came into office with who had corruption scandals. But once they got into office, they became suddenly people of integrity. And Mr. President, in as much as we are discussing education, we know that the help decries of you've even told us, and it's also something I take issue with. While we were with you at State House, you told us that the debt was around 70 billion, or there was a time you told us 70 billion. A time came you told us private universities have 51 billion. And today you said 180 billion. And as a financial engineer, I'm finding it a little bit hard to reconcile all these figures, Mr. President. So you could also state it a bit more clearly over that. But the HELB and the PS of Education has told us severally that the public institutions had debts and all such kinds of stuff. But we have seen exposés on Twitter, exposés by the Auditor General, telling us that a chair somewhere costs 3.3 million, Mr. President. I will not rush to criticize anything of the sort, but you know that corruption is a big expenditure in this country. What is your administration doing to ensure that corruption ends in public institutions? Mr. President, you are using 9 beaters to classify people. Once again, I'm a financial engineer, and I take keen interest in numbers. You use 9 factors to classify people. Now, explain this to me. We have a parent earning 25,000 shillings, and the firstborn has made it to JCOT to do financial engineering. But this family has 7 people. It has 6 siblings under the person who has made it to financial engineering. So, under what category does this person fall? Let's even say it's 50,000. This person lives in the CBD at a place where the life is very expensive. So under what category does this person follow? Or will we have the same thing repeating itself of that girl who was looking at the people with graduation gowns? Because the firstborn, yes, made it to campus, and they found the new funding model, and they appealed because they were placed in band 5. But unfortunately, as you've heard, we have let me confirm the numbers. We have 26,000 appeals. And also as a financial engineer, I know that not all appeals usually go through as they ought to because of the system glitches. Mr. President, kindly explain to me where this person should land, because among the 9 bidders, the issue of the siblings and probably the dependents around that family, because some of these families adopt people not because they have too much, but because they have compassion on the people in the society who the government is unable or unwilling to help. Mr. President, we also have the issue of a defunct KUSO. And Mr. President, I love what the gentleman who has spoken in Swahili. I must first commend him because of the perfect grammar. Of the issue of, I do not know if you know anyone who represents other campus students. Because, comrades, do you know anyone who represents you? Do you have anyone? So, Mr. President, I would like to urge you to probably constitute something that will even be recognized by the government, because as students we have been crying, as student leaders we have been crying for a very long time of people who are there to just by themselves cast, Mr. President, people who are there not to represent our will, but they are own, people who are there for their own stomachs. And these are the people who you are striking against. Mr. President, people in this room are angry because of 2 people. One, it is you. I've told you I'll be impeached if I do not tell you the truth. My constituents told me that they feel, and I will put this as respectfully as possible, that you advise your advisors. Because of the issues, for example, let's say the issue of the new funding model. Mr. President, the only person who has explained the new funding model in the best way is you. So my constituents were asking me, as in, shouldn't the people in charge of that ministry be able to put it better than the president himself? The other person that the comrades are very angry with is in this room, seated somewhere in front, Mr. President, somebody who has been claiming to represent our interests. But, comrades, does that person represent your interests? Does that person represent your interests? So, Mr. President, if anyone comes to you claiming, Mr. President, the comrades are telling me to tell him to walk out, but we are here for peace, Mr. President. So I would want to put it as straight as possible and to be as brief as a cock on a hen. Mr. President, as things stand, we do not have a representative. Ukweli ama uongo? We do not have a representative unless you enable us have some permanent office to ensure that student leaders are represented, and you ensure that, unlike the many government offices we have today, the government will not interfere with the affairs of the students. Mr. President, the lady there has raised an important issue. First, the questions that are here, most of them have been raised by the people around me because they've realized that you might not have a lot of time to speak. Somebody named Karongo Adangwa, the senator of Kiambu County, and by the way, God willing, I will replace him, raised the point of all these monies being brought to one pool. The MC has a bursary, the woman rep has a bursary. Probably if it was not for a very little chance, the chief might be having a bursary. Mr. President, the entire structure that represents us, and by the way, we also feel overrepresented as Kenyans, and that is one of the reasons we are demonstrating, Mr. President. We have 22 CSS, we have CASs, we have permanent secretaries, and all these people have budgets and they have salaries, but I'll put that aside, Mr. President. So these people have bursaries. And then to get a bursary, you must know somebody in the country that we live in. You've said that you feel for the poor. You've said that you are blamed for feeling for the poor, and somebody opined that we are all politicians and we all got elected through public relations. So, Mr. President, if you really feel for the poor, kindly address that issue. We have been with you in several forums, and you've said that you are not afraid to bite the bullet, to take the bull by its horns. So, Mr. President, these MPs will bring a lot of issues. Somebody said that once you remove the CDF, people will not be vying for these positions because they go there for their stomachs. Ukweli ama uongo? Mr. President, kindly consider that, because that will be a legacy.
My good friend Gishangi from JKUAT has asked me, why the rush? I am tempted to say that, if the situation our universities were in is not serious to warrant us to have this conversation, and by the way, it took 6 months to 8 months of a conversation with different professionals. It was not something that it was over one night or a weekend or a week. It is something that was very clearly thought out. And you said something like, we make promises that we never keep. Let me tell you, this is one commitment I made. The universities are here. The vice chancellors are here. They can tell you the commitments I made on this model were delivered last year, and it is making a difference in our universities. That is the reality. You did say that corruption is a big problem, and I agree with you 100%. Corruption is a big problem. And I want to thank the university leadership, because part of the corruption that has been going on is on even the money that we give to universities. We decided that we are going to go using technology. I'm very happy that the university leaders accepted that we use technology. Unfortunately, our secondary schools and primary schools took us to court. They still want to deal in cash. And I know we lose a lot of money there. Corruption is something we must deal with it firmly. I have made proposals on what we should do as a nation. I have had conversations with the Chief Justice. I have had conversations with the leadership of Parliament on what we need to do on legislation to make sure that we deal with corruption. But we can also, corruption is not just about jailing people. It is about putting systems in place that make sure that corruption doesn't happen. And one of them is to use technology to make sure that we are sure of what we are doing. And that is what this whole system and what we are doing with HELP and what we are doing with COOPS and what we are doing with our universities is all about. Do you want to say something as the team leader who was in Naivasha? These good guys are saying you said what they did not agree.
Your Excellency, one of the issues they raised is that they wanted the MTI reviewed, and that's why we put in place the task force in which we have representatives from the Higher Education Loans Board, Universities Fund, Vice Chancellors, as well as lecturers with specialist expertise, and they have been working on that MTI. So one of the issues that should be very clear is that we do not usually use the raw scores. So if, for example, you have 9 dependents, or 5, or 2, or 3, all of these have a weight. And that weight is usually determined by a very random group. So HELP will put a group of students, lecturers, parents, members of the community, church, and they decide how do you think this variable is important in determining the capacity of a family. And so these weights are then looked at scientifically, and in the end, all of these are put into a composite kind of variable that is determined with a mathematical model. And we have all of this. It will be published so that all the stakeholders can look at it and tell us where they think this model can be improved. So that is some of the work that we started undertaking after the Naivasha retreat.
Friend, let us deal with this as openly, as transparently as possible. You know, the vice chancellors who are sitting here are not madmen and women. You know, for them to agree for us to work with this model. They've seen what happens with the old model. They participated. We worked with them. We worked on simulations. We brought in experts to look at, because the one thing we cannot do is to compromise on the quality of our education. The old model is compromising on the quality of our education, because if lecturers are not paid, if material is not available to train our doctors, if workshops are not working to train our engineers, we will end up with the wrong engineers, we will end up with the wrong doctors, we will end up with the wrong teachers, and we will destroy our country. It will be very reckless of us. It will be very irresponsible of us. Me as president, these vice chancellors as managers of our universities, you as students, for us to accept, to walk a path that leads to the destruction of our country and our education for that matter.